Hello everyone. Today we're going to build a Chrome extension with Cursor. It's called XEngage and it can help boost your engagement on x.com by 350%. It uses Claude 3.5 Sonnet to generate the replies, but here comes the best part. We'll make sure they sound authentically like you by incorporating your personal writing style. Let me show you exactly what we're building. After installing XEngage, you'll need to enter your API key, but don't worry about security. Instead of storing it in your browser, we'll use Cloudflare's infrastructure to keep everything safe and secure. More specifically, we're using a Cloudflare worker in combination with the KV namespace to not only store your API key and writing style securely, but also make secure API requests to Claude 3.5 Sonnet through your worker instead of your browser. I'll walk you through the entire process, setting up a Cloudflare worker, creating and connecting a KV namespace to it, making secure API calls to Anthropic through your worker, adding buttons to the X interface in just the right spots, and creating a settings page where you can add your writing style and manage your API key. All right, so before we actually start coding in Cursor, we want to use this PRT template generator, and AI created that generator for me. So if you want to have it, I will add the link to the Google Doc in the video description. But all you have to do here to get the PRD for a Chrome extension is to add a description of your extension. So in my case, I added the following description. The Chrome extension should help me engage on x.com, formerly Twitter, when the user installs the extension and opens it for the first time. You should be prompted to enter Anthropic's API key, which is then saved to a KV space with the help of a Cloudflare worker. And we'll talk about those two things in a bit. The Cloudflare worker has 3 routes: save key, generate response, and reset key. Here's the workflow. User installs the extension, buttons are injected underneath x.com DOM in element. So here's a slight typo underneath x.com DOM element called, and then there's the div with a specific class name. And the buttons read great, disagree, question. User opens extension, is prompted to enter Anthropic's API key. Then the key is stored to a KV space with the help of a Cloudflare worker. The main page of the extension shows up in popup.html, showing 4 different colors, circles, which are buttons to change the color of the injected buttons, and a cogwheel which links to an options page where the user can change or reset the API key and also enter a personal excerpt of his writing style. When the user clicks on the 4 buttons in DOM element, the Cloudflare worker makes an API request to Anthropic's API to generate an API response based on the tweet's content, and the response is then injected into the DOM element with the class draft editor container. So if we take this and we'll head over to Claude and you paste it, Claude will generate a product requirements document, and it will for the desired project, right? So it will give it a name. You have the overview, a primary purpose, the target users, key features, and so on. And we want to take this and head over to Cursor, and you want to paste this PRD right here. And then all you need to do is to tell Cursor that it should create the Chrome extension. So let's do that. Please have a look at PRD. Please have a look at PRD. This is the extension I want to build. Please create all the boilerplate code I need to load the extension into my web browser. So we want to create popup.html, we want to create popup.css, background.css, content.js, this is also JS, popup.js, and manifest.json. So those are the files that you usually need to create a Chrome extension and to be able to load them into a Chrome-based browser, or any browser for that matter. And I don't need you to create functionality yet. Please just add the extension. And we also want to do one more thing, which is giving Claude a template for the front end, right? So we'll put this here. It's a simple design just to get things going. Please just add the extension design, use front end as inspiration, but create the boilerplate code for the needed functions too. So we want to have the boilerplate so that we know which functions we're going to need throughout the development of this Chrome extension. And the only thing that we want to have is the front end, and the only feature I want you to create is the injection of the buttons in the desired DOM element on x.com. As for the design of the buttons, make them outline style with the standard Twitter blue color. You can add a emoji too, like emoji plus great. So we'll hit enter. While Cursor is hopefully creating all of the files, we'll head over to the browser because I quickly wanted to show you what a worker is and what a KV namespace is. So if you go to workers.cloudflare.com, you will see in the header it says you write code, we handle the rest. And essentially what a worker is, it gives you the option of deploying serverless code. So for example, a function, in our case, this would be the store API key function and also the make response function to the Anthropic's API. So this is why we are using workers, because they are much more secure than if we would just store the API key in the storage API of Chrome inside of the browser, right? I want to add an additional layer of security so that attackers, if they wanted to get a hold of the API key, would have to hack into Cloudflare's infrastructure, which is much more difficult than getting access to the storage API inside of the browser. Because whenever things are running in the client side, or aka in the browser, if you have an attacker that knows what he's doing, it might be more easier for him to get access to sensitive data inside of the browser than it would be if you would create a proxy, like in this case, creating the worker.js and making a request to the worker file. And the last thing we need, KV spaces. So if you have a look at the documentation, a KV namespace or key value namespace is nothing else than, you can imagine it like a table, okay, where you have a key and a value, and this is where we store our API key of the user. And then the worker will access the API key through the KV namespace and will make a request to the Anthropic's API. Now, to set up the worker, you have to create an account with Cloudflare, obviously, and you have to go to the dashboard. On the right, on the left, you see the sideboard, which says workers and pages. You want to click on overview, you want to click create worker, and you want to give it a name. So in our case, I will just use AI commenting tool. And what this will do is Cloudflare will deploy a website for you, which you can access via this URL, ai-commenting-tool. And this is obviously the name of my account, .workers.dev. And for now, we'll leave the boilerplate code as it is. We'll hit deploy. This should only take a couple of seconds. And then you will see this page. Okay, now you have different options. For example, Wrangler CLI is an option to communicate with your worker through your terminal. Okay, we don't really need this right now. We don't need to add a custom domain either. And we also don't want to explore other resources. So for now, we'll hit continue to project, and this will redirect you to the worker itself. Okay, now what we need is to create a KV namespace, and we want to bind that KV namespace to the worker so that it has access to the variable stored inside of it. Okay, for that you want to click on KV and create namespace. I will just call it X auto commenting tool, click on add, and now you are able to click on view. And as you can see, you have another tab which is called KV pairs. We want to call it API key, and we want to set it to null for now. And now what we have to do is we have to bind, as I've said, the KV space to the worker. For that, we click on overview, open the worker, go to settings, and here you find a section which is called bindings. You want to click on add. You want to choose the KV namespace. You want to give it a variable name. We'll call it API_key and select our KV namespace, and we want to hit deploy. So this is everything that you have to do inside of Cloudflare to create a worker and KV namespace and bind the KV namespace to your worker. And now what we can do is open the worker and click on edit code. Okay, this will redirect you to the code editor. On the left side, you see the boilerplate code that we've seen earlier when we created the worker. And on the right, you get a preview of the URL or of the website, so to speak. Now, we don't have any styling, any elements that we see like with a usual website, but whenever the worker gets a request, it returns a response, and this response right now is hello world. So we could also easily change this to hello YouTube, and this would take effect once we hit deploy. Okay, so this only takes a couple of seconds. So for example, if I refresh the page now, and the new code is loading, it should say hello YouTube. Now, the thing that we need to do is let's head back over to Cursor for now, and let's check Cursor's work. Now, as you can see, it created the different files, the manifest.json with the short description and also the host permissions. We get the popup.css file and popup.html so that our Chrome extension hopefully looks like this. And we have the popup.js file to save the API key and also input the API key. We have the content.js file, and this is the file which interacts with the content of the page. Okay, and as you can see here, it created a response types array with the different buttons, and then also created a button container and hopefully injected the buttons properly in the draft editor container, which was also defined inside of our PRD. So if we have a look at this, position buttons within div with the class name draft editor -editor container. Okay, so for now we'll hit accept all, and we want to head over to the browser and we want to open the following URL. So I'm using the Arc browser. This is why you read Arc, but you can also add Chrome//extensions. This will redirect you to your extensions list, and you want to make sure that you toggle the developer mode. Okay, and once you do this, 3 buttons appear at the top left called Load Unpacked Extensions and Update. You want to click on Load Unpacked, and then you want to choose the folder where your Chrome extension is located in. In my case, that's AI Commenting Tool. I want to hit Select, and now we get a error which says, okay, could not load icon in assets/icon 16 PNG. And the reason for that is in the manifest.json, we specify the location of the icons for our Chrome extension. Now, unfortunately, my folder for the icons is called icons. This is why Chrome can't find the resources. So we should be able to resolve the issue just by renaming the folder to assets. And now if we hit retry, you can see the Chrome extension was loaded successfully into the browser. Okay. And if we head over to Chrome, as you can see, we've already injected the buttons into the desired position. Now, obviously, this looks still a bit wonky. The front end or the design isn't quite there yet, but for now, let's just pin the extension. And if we open it, it doesn't really look exactly like in the screenshot, but that's not a big deal. It's good enough for now. Okay. So the only thing that I would like to change is the position of the button. So we create a container which is called XEngage containers, and we find this in content.css. And here we want to, I think we need to decrease the top margin a bit. So let's see if this already did the trick. We want to reload the extension and also x.com. And now, as you can see, we can even increase it a bit more. Let's do 30 and let's reload again. Now, obviously the styling still looks a bit off. The corners are not rounded fully. Okay, but for now, this is good enough. So we can click the buttons, but apparently nothing happens because we haven't implemented the functionality yet. Now, the next thing we need to do is to actually create the code for the worker, because we want to store the API key. And for that, I want to do some slight changes for the Chrome extension, because whenever the user installs the extension and opens the pop-up window for the first time, I want him to be prompted to enter the API key. And then after he's saved the API key, I want the main window to appear with the 4 color buttons and also the settings button. So let's tell Cursor what we want. This works. I need some slight changes though. When the user opens the extension for the first time after installing, he should be prompted to enter his API key, his Anthropic's API key. And after he saved it to a KV namespace via a Cloudflare worker, he should see the main page of the extension, which is the different color button and also and obviously the browser can't really display. So if you have a look at this, it's a cogwheel, right? The browser can't really display this without any issues. This is why we see these funky signs here. And if we change this to settings, let's do a refresh and also refresh the browser. Now, as you can see, it says settings, so we'll leave it at that for now. And also the settings button. So I need you to do a few things. Change the code so that it works in the way as I've explained above. However, we still need a check whether the user has entered and saved the API key, which is browser-based, so that he doesn't have to enter the API key every time he reloads a page. But the API key should be stored in a KV namespace in Cloudflare. Create the Worker.js code with the specific routes, with the routes specified in the PRD. Only write the code for the, let's check what is it called. Is it called store API key or save API key? It's called save-key. For the save-key route, and make the other two routes, generate response and reset key, boilerplate. And the last thing that we need to do is, okay, I want to be able to store the API key in Cloudflare. Use Cloudflare Worker docs for reference. Only work on this feature for now. Don't change or delete anything we have so far, but add to the, and we want to add to the code base. Okay. Now, if we hit enter, meanwhile, we can switch over to Cloudflare, to the worker. So this is the section where we will add the new code. And if you remember, we called the namespace API_key. Okay, so this will be important because we need this, as you can see here, API keys. So this is the name of the KV namespace. And now, as you can see, Cursor did some changes to the background.js file. And also we need to do some slight changes here because we need to fetch the correct worker URL. Okay, and for now we'll hit accept all. We need this URL. Okay, we need to go here and we want to put this here so that we fetch the correct route. We need to save this. And we also need to use the worker.js file. We'll paste it here. And we need to change the following. We need to access API key dot put. Okay, now let me open this in a new tab. And we want to click on KV and we want to open it so we can check whether or not the API key is saved in the right place. Okay, now we want to deploy the worker and we want to refresh this. Now we should only see enter the API key. Okay, for that we need to go to console.anthropic.com. Okay, you have to create an account and then you have to click on API keys. And there we will see a list of your API keys. You can click create. We say AI commenting tool. We want to choose the workspace default. We want to copy the key, head over to our Chrome extension and save it. And let's see if it already works. It says saving and nothing happens. So apparently we get some problems. Okay. Whenever you get some problems, they should be visible here in the extensions list. Here, another button will pop up, which is errors, or you should be able to see them in the console. Now, unfortunately, in our case, nothing happens. So what we want to do is we want to head over to Cursor and say, okay, I've made all the changes you told me, but when I try to add the API key, it only says loading in the extension, and I don't get any errors to debug. So could you please add some logging to better understand what is happening? Now Cursor will make some changes in popup.js, as you can see here, starting the API saving process. And what we really need is the changes in background.js and also the changes in Worker.js, because we want to get the error messages from the API call that we make to Cloudflare's Worker. Okay, so we want to put this here. We have to think about changing the name of the KV namespace. Let's see, where is it? Here. Okay, we want to deploy this and we want to head over to the extension. We want to refresh it. Now we need to copy the correct API key from Anthropic, put that here, save key, and let's see if we get any errors in the extensions tab. Yes, we do. Here is the problem. Background worker error response failed to save API key details. API key is not defined. So maybe we need to use the environment variable. So essentially there are two different ways to access the worker, and one involves the .env object, as you can see here in the fetch request, and the other one you can add the namespace by just typing the name. So apparently, let's check if Cursor implemented the other way. So we want to reload. Now this should have worked. Let's check the worker. We'll refresh the page, and now we should see API key is stored. Let's click view, KV pairs. And there we have the API key. So unfortunately, we didn't use the correct key inside of our KV namespace, which is not a big deal. So we'll just head over here, and we don't have the user ID, so we call it API key, because this is the key pair that the key that we have here, right? So what we can do is also delete this user ID because we don't have it. We don't need the user ID. So we can change this. Hopefully I didn't make any mistakes. So let's double check. We'll delete this here, and I think we have to reload the extension. So we have to, let me check. We have to remove it, yes, and we want to load it again. So let's do this and head over here, and we want to pin it. We want to store the API key. We want to head over to the KV namespace, hit refresh, and now everything should work properly. As you can see, we have now stored the API key as a value for our key, which is called API key, okay? The next thing we need to do is obviously add the features for commenting, okay? So that a user can click on the button, and then the reply is injected here. So we want to head back over to Cursor. Okay, this works great. Now I want you to add the first feature, which is making the API request to Anthropic's API via the Cloudflare worker. For that, I need you to update the, what's it called? I think generate response route in the worker file. So what we need to update is, where is it? So we have the save key route. This works correctly, okay? And now we need to update the generate dash response route here, okay? In the worker file. And here's a code snippet for how to make an API request to Anthropic's API, but it's in TypeScript. So please translate it to vanilla.js and make it work for my code base. And what we need to do is go to Anthropic. We need to go to the docs. We have to click on get started, and we have to scroll down, and what you want to copy and paste is this here, okay? Claude_quickstart.js, the TypeScript version. We want to copy that, and we want to paste it here. Did I miss anything? So again, for reference, here's the workflow. Oh, let me check. We should have the workflow inside of the PRD, right? Installation, first name setup, composing new tweet. Open compose box, click response type button, edit generate response, replying to tweet. Now, just for good measure, we will edit inside of this chat window again. Here's the workflow. User opens the comment modal on x.com and clicks one of the injected buttons inside of the modal in the element with the name, and the name is draft editor dash container, as you can see in PRD. Then an API request is made to Anthropic's API by using the API key stored in the KV namespace, and the generated response is then injected into the element with the same name. So the user can still edit the response and reply with it. Now, one problem that we could potentially have is that Cursor creates a function which basically creates an overlay over this container. And this might look like as if it would have been injected here, but really it's just a container above. So if you have a look at it from the side, so this is our editor part where we can type something. And sometimes Cursor can make this mistake to put in container as an overlay above this. And this obviously makes it that we can't edit the response, right? Because it's just a artificial element that's not really, it is on the page, but not in the desired spot, if that makes sense, okay? So this is why I specifically explained it to Cursor. And we also need the prompt for the LLM where we define the tweet content for which we want to create the reply, and also define the correct reply based on the clicked button, so e.g. grade, etc. Now for that, we obviously need a way to access this tweet content, and we want to right click, and then we need to choose the correct element, okay? And the element that we need to choose is CSS 175OI2R, okay? So, because as you can see, if we open this, we have two span elements where we have the different, where we have the content, okay? So let's copy that, copy element. Here's the div with, here's the container where the original tweet we want to reply to is stored on the page. As you can see, the tweet is nested inside of a span inside of this div. Please choose the correct element with the content to send to the LLM. Now this is a somewhat complex task. I don't know if Cursor will get it right on the first try. We just have to go a few times back and forth probably, but let's see. So it should update the worker file. Now, as you can see, worker.js, it should only give us new code in this section, okay? The rest of the file should stay the same, apparently. So let's see. Okay, it also creates a new file, a new function, generate Anthropic response. So we need this too. And it also made some changes in content.js, get tweet content, and in background.js, which is responsible for generating the response, or rather making the request to our worker.js file, if that makes sense. Okay, so we'll hit accept all. We'll just take the whole worker file. We head over to Cloudflare. We want to paste it here. Now, obviously, we need to do some changes, which is, where is it? We need to do some changes for the KV space to work. So it's called .env API _ key. And here env.api _ key. And this should be it. Now let's see if this works. We probably have to, as I've said, go a little bit back and forth. So now if we hit refresh, you can see we are still logged in. For some reason, the buttons disappeared. This is obviously not what we wanted at all. You made the buttons on x.com response types disappear with your change. This was obviously not correct. Add them back in, but don't change anything else. Okay, yeah, the buttons disappeared because we replaced the entire content.js file. Okay, yeah, that was obviously not correct. It didn't make any changes. So maybe it was just a glitch. Sometimes it takes a while for the changes to appear. So if we click great, nothing happens, but do we get a error? Yes, we do. Okay, so background error generating response, API key not found. Now apparently, I'm not sure. So API key not found. Now whenever this happens, you apparently always want to copy that. I get this error. For some reason, the API key was not found. So let's check whether if we have made the right changes inside of the worker. So apparently we need to look for this. Okay, so this should be correct, right? It changed the user ID back in. So, okay, yeah, this is the problem. So we should be able to resolve this ourselves. So let's see if this already did the trick. Now the problem was we're trying to access the API key under a specific user ID. But if you remember, we changed this feature to store the API key value to the key, which is called API key. Okay, so now the worker tried to access the API key under the user ID, which we obviously don't have. Okay, now if we go back to extensions and we reload, and we also reload this, and let's see if we find another tweet. Let's do this one and we'll click great. This works. So we get the request. That's an interesting scenario with microservices and high traffic. And if you have a look at the original tweet, you can see that it's indeed about microservices. Now, unfortunately, the thing that I didn't want to happen happened, which is we created an overlay, because if you take a closer look, you can see underneath this response, we still see post your reply. Unfortunately, this does two things. We can't reply because we have injected an overlay above the usual container. And also we can add stuff and then it says reply. But this is only because we add stuff underneath in the reply section, okay? Right now, this really doesn't make sense, okay? So we need to ask Cursor to change this. We can't really copy it or paste it. It simply doesn't work, okay? So if we have a look at the element itself, so we'll click on inspect, you can see we have the draft editor container, and here we have the engage container. And I mean, we add the stuff inside of the correct element as it seems, but we still have an overlay. So let's see, if we refresh the page, we'll choose a different thing. We'll do inspect, and we have the draft editor container. And if we start writing now, you will see that here is a span element where this stuff gets added. So this is where we want to add this thing, okay? So again, we need to copy that element, copy it, head over to Cursor. We can delete this. Obviously, we resolved this ourselves. So this works, but you haven't injected the response in the right spot. And because of that, I can't hit the reply button because you created an overlay and don't injected the response in the correct editor window. Above is the HTML element again, and you can see that there's a span element nested inside of the div with the class draft editor container, which currently holds the value. It doesn't always hold the value. I've just added it so you know where to put the response, However, there's an issue. Let's see if we delete this completely. So it actually gets appended, and we need to use this element. Okay, let's copy that. We only want to have this. So we need to copy the element and we want to head over to Cursor. However, there's an issue. This span element isn't always there. It's actually appended to the parent span, as you can see above, and it's only appended when the user starts to type his reply. So is there a way to still append the response in the right spot? Now, this might sound way too complicated for Cursor. So before I hit enter, I wanted to paraphrase what I just told it. So this seems a bit complex, and I want to make sure you understood the assignment. So before you write any code, please repeat what I just told you. Also, only work on this feature. Don't change the worker file or anything. You should only work on the request injection process. Now we'll hit enter. Let me summarize what you're explaining. The current issue is with injecting the AI response into the correct location in x.com's tweet editor. The structure is draft editor, public content, yada, and we have the actual text content here. The challenge is the inner span with the data dash text true, which holds the actual text only created after the user starts typing in the editor. Currently, our code is creating an overlay instead of properly injecting the text into x.com's editor structure. We need to find a way to either trigger the span creation if it doesn't exist, or work with x.com's draft.js editor in a way that properly updates the editor state. Would you like me to proceed implementing with the solution for this specific issue? Yes, please. So according to its explanation, it sounds right to me. Okay, so this is why I will trust Cursor, and I will just say yes, please, and we'll see what it comes up with. So it should make some changes in content.js. So based on the explanation, we need to modify the response injection in content.js instead of directly setting text content. We need to focus the editor first to ensure x.com creates the necessary span elements, simulate typing to properly draft the internal state, and then this approach should... Now, I'm not quite sure if this really works, but we'll hit accept all. We'll head over here. We reload the extension. Hopefully we don't get any errors. Do I need to add a new API key? No, it should be still saved. Let's give it a bit of time until we see the button. So we probably have to reload again, yes. Now let's do this one and we'll hit great. And now, obviously the styling looks still a bit off. We have some overflowing going on, but other than that, we can click reply, we can copy and paste it, so which means the response is actually in the correct element, and we still have to do some fine-tuning for the prompt. So for that, we'll head over to the worker, and we need to tweak this prompt a bit because we don't want Claude, in our case, because we're using Anthropic's API key, we don't want it to tell us what it's doing. We want it to just do it. The response should be okay. Also, don't tell me what you do, just generate the response. And we hit deploy again. And now let's head over to this, try it one more time. We want to ask a question. And now, as you can see, let me quickly paste it again. We still need to do a little bit of styling because we have to increase the space between the response and the buttons. Obviously, this looks kind of shit, but other than that, we made it work in under an hour. I will still do a little bit of tweaking for the design, and also we need to add another route in the Worker.js file for the third route, which is the reset key. Okay, so we will also want the user to be able to delete the key. This is why we implemented the settings button in the first place. So that's incredible growth for your design studio in such a short time. What strategies did you implement to attract and retain so many high-value clients? So this works. This is great. And as I've said, we still have to do a little bit of tweaking. We have to improve the styling, and I also want to create the settings page. So when the user clicks the settings button, it should create a whole new page. And I want the user to be able to reset the key and also enter an excerpt of his writing style so that Claude will generate a response in the writing style of the user. Because right now, sometimes this might sound a little bit too AI-ish, okay? And this is why we want to add this. So we finished the core feature in under an hour, and now I will do a little bit of tweaking. And another thing that we have to add, for example, is also we want to change the button color. So we'll work on the button color first. This works well. Great. Now I want to add some other features. The first one, the user should be able to change button color by clicking one of the buttons inside of the extension. This should change the color of the injected buttons. Only work on that feature and nothing else. So this should also make some changes in content.js, okay? Because remember, this is the place where we engage with or interact with the content of the page. So we make some changes in content.js, and we also make some changes in popup.js. So we'll hit accept all. We want to reload the extension. We want to do this, and as you can see, we should now be able to change the style. Okay, apparently those are not the correct Twitter colors, but I mean, I think they're probably, if we click on settings and privacy and we go to theme, okay. So those apparently, they're close enough, right? So the green is correct, the orange is correct. The red is not quite right, but it's not a big deal, okay? And for that, so we have that. And the last step is to add the settings page. Okay, this works too. Now I want you to add the settings page. When the user clicks the settings button inside of the extension, it should open a new tab where the user can change the extension settings. I want to give him the option of resetting the API key and also the option of adding a personal writing excerpt so that the API response sounds like the user has actually written it, which means the excerpt should be used by the API request in the worker file to mimic the personal writing style of the user. However, it shouldn't be too, because it would increase the costs of the API call too much. Around 200 to 300 characters should be enough. Okay, for now, only work on the personal excerpt thing. So again, I don't want to give Cursor too much work. This is why I wanted to work on the excerpt thing. Oh, now it should create a new settings page, as you can see here, settings.html. It also should create a settings.css file, and it should make some changes in popup.js probably, and create the code for settings.js. So manifest.json, we have settings.html. Obviously, it put all of the styling into the settings.html file. We will leave it at that for now, okay? I just want to see if this actually works. So we reload the extension, we do this, and we click on settings. Now this opens a new page. Apparently this doesn't really look good. We still have to make some changes, but it made some changes in popup.js too. Finally, update the workers generate Anthropic response function to use the writing style, and update the generate response route to include the writing style. So this is the generate response. We want to copy that, or only the part that's interesting for us, and we need to put it here. So we need to add this here. As you can see, we need to do it like this. So this should work, right? So now we have the generate Anthropic response, we have the tweet content, we have the response type, we have the API key and the writing style. Here's a sample of the user's writing style to mimic. And the next thing we need to do is we need to fetch the writing style, as you can see here. Now that I see it, we also need to add the writing style from the KV space, and we haven't implemented that feature for now. Let's see, does it write to the KV space? Probably not, right? So we have save key. So apparently your solution tries to fetch the writing style from the KV, but we haven't saved it. Could you please add this feature to the settings page so the user saves the writing style to the KV namespace once? And we should probably create a new KV namespace for that, right? Because we don't want to store it in the same thing that it's responsible for handling the API keys. So we want to create a new namespace. We want to call it auto commenting tool, or we want to call it writing excerpt. We want to add this. I'm not sure if we could even link a namespace to a worker. I think it should be possible, but I've never done it. So we can add another binding, and we can call this, and we call it writing, and we choose the writing excerpt. Will it deploy and save it KV namespace. I've created a new KV namespace in Cloudflare, and it's accessible through the variable name writing. Could you please add this feature to the worker file and also make the changes to settings and settings.js? Please make it work for my code base don't delete or change anything we have so far. And we'll hit enter. Now this should make a request to the worker.js file at some point. Let's see. Yeah, as you can see here, save writing style, we add a new route, and it should also make some changes in Worker because we need to add the new writing style route and also update the generate response endpoint to use the writing namespace, okay? As you can see here, already made the update so that we also can access the writing style. So what we need to do is hit accept all. Let's copy that, but before that I want to copy that and store it somewhere safe so that we can, well, change this. If we break the code with this new code, we want to paste that here and we have to do some changes. So we need to, where is it? We need to make some changes for the API key. So it's called env.api key, API keys, and we access writing. So we'll hit deploy. This version was saved and now I still need writing excerpt. Let's choose this one here, right? Just for the sake of it. We'll head over here, we reload it. We go to settings, we do this. So apparently this is too long. Let's do this. Okay, so we'll hit save writing style. Writing style is saved successfully. And if we go to the KV namespace and we want to view this, we want the KV pairs, and there we have the style safely in Harbor. And now if we open this and we click on great, nothing happens. Okay, why is that? We get some errors. API key not found. Generate response. It's probably the same issue as before because we're trying to access the API key through the user ID, right? Let's see, user ID. We want to call this API key. We want to put it there and we want to generate the response. We want to get the API key. So this is what we want. We can still use the user ID for the writing style because we've stored it correctly. And we want to hit deploy again, head over to the extensions, clear all, reload, and we want to click on great. And again, we are in the right spot. Apparently we still have to change the thing again. So here's a writing style, analyze incorporators, only create the response, only answer with the response. Don't tell me what you do. We'll deploy. But now we have the writing style that we have provided the model with, okay? What ambitious venture doth thy mind conceive? To launch a celestial eye upon the heavens' vast expanse, streaming wonders hid hitherto unseen, though the cost be steep, and so on. This worked. Now, the last thing we have to add is input sanitization, right? I will probably do this off camera and I will put it inside of the intro so that the video doesn't get too long. We are at 1 hour and 20 minutes right now, so 80 minutes to create the Chrome extension, which is pretty awesome, I think. We made it somewhat secure. Now we probably have to, as I've said, we need to do a little bit of styling for the Chrome extension. But other than that, I will put the code to the GitHub repo down below. Okay, if you want this, guys, you can have it. The only thing you need to do is just add your own API key. Okay, I will obviously deactivate the API key that you've seen in the video so you can access it once the video is published. But other than that, it looks pretty great. Okay, I quickly wanted to jump in to show you the changes that I made off camera. Okay, now as you can see, the user is able to change the color to all these different colors that you can use if you have X Premium. Okay, and the other thing is, one of the bugs was whenever you would enter text and it would be too long, the text would overflow and it would look just horrendous. Okay, so this is why I changed the CSS styling with the help of Cursor so that the buttons are at all times at the bottom of the container. And also the last change, another change was, if you remember, in the video, the buttons would often appear in this, what is happening window. Now we have fixed the code so that they only appear in the post your reply window, okay? And the way I did this was, well, basically I just told Cursor what to do. I again provided the screenshot and it made some changes to popup.html and also popup.css. And some other changes that I made, was the settings page. Now, as you can see, we can still add the personal writing style. It looks a lot cleaner. It also has this dark theme. We can reset the API key, which basically just means deleting the API key from the KV namespace. And once you reset the API key, you can check it here. It asks if you really want to delete the API key. We click OK. It says resetting with a nice simple loading state, and then you get an info that you can see here. And if you go back to x.com and you open the Chrome extension again, you see that we have to enter our API key again, okay? So, and apparently if you take the key again and you add it back into the extension, it will be saved again. And the best part about it, if we look at the Cloudflare KV namespace, it will be added to the correct user, okay? So as you can see here, that's the KV namespace. We have the key, which is the user ID. It starts with B89, ends with 324. And this is for the writing excerpt, right? B89, 324. And if we head over to the worker and we look at it, and if we head over to the other KV namespace, which is the auto commenting tool where we save the API keys, and we have a look at the value B89.324 is the correct user, and we stored the API key again. Now, these changes were actually pretty convenient and pretty easy, okay? So this is all of the styling. As you can see, Cursor didn't get it right on the first try, okay? Sometimes it would look like this, that the buttons were pushed down, pushed outside of the container. That would look not good. Here's another sample where you can see that the buttons only appear if I would enter a certain text length into the reply window. But eventually Cursor was able to make it work on the, I think, 4th or 5th try. And the last step that I added was, the next feature that I added was the ability to reset the API key. And I literally just ask it to, okay, now you want to add the last feature, which is giving the user the option of resetting the API key. For that, add a button in the settings tab in a position which makes sense from a UX standpoint, and also finish the route /reset-key in the Worker.js file. And this was basically the last step. Now, the most important step, I hope you can see it in the video, is doing a security audit. So here's what I asked Cursor to do. Okay, at any point, is there a way to get a hold of user information with external tools like Burp Suite? And Burp Suite is, for those of you who don't know, it's basically a tool used by ethical hackers and non-ethical hackers to intercept requests made from the browser to servers or whatever. I asked it, I really want to make this extension secure and protected against hackers and attackers. What can I do to achieve this? And with my current implementation of handling API calls with workers, is it even necessary? Are there no important information in the browser? Do I need to implement input sanitization in the text field? So basically what I did was to ask Cursor if it was able to create kind of like a step-by-step plan, what I need to do in order to fix the issues. And it gave me a list sorted by risk level, and the highest risk was, okay, API key storage and transmission. The API keys stored in plain text are stored in plain text in the Cloudflare KV namespace, okay? And if the KV is compromised, attacker gets all the user API keys. So the question is, do we really need to implement this? Because how big is the likelihood of an attacker compromising the Cloudflare servers, right? So at least in my mind, this doesn't really make sense, because I think you should never say never, but I think the likelihood of that happening is pretty low. Now, missing CSP headers. This is something that I added, okay? If you have to look at the manifest.json, I added the content security policy headers. And there's a medium risk. Currently, we're using HTTPS traffic, but we don't use any additional protection, okay? So attackers could do a min in the middle attack and intercept API calls. Again, I don't know how likely that is. And then we have a bunch of low risk security issues. However, there are secure aspects. So we have the worker implementation, which is properly isolated from the client. We use the course headers correctly. We have error handling implemented. The only thing that we could do is like deleting the console.log statements that we added earlier to see where the issue is, okay? we have proper permission scoping for the Chrome extension. We have isolated storage uses. We do secure messaging between the components. We have proper error handling in the API routes. We have rate limiting, which is automatically implemented via Anthropic, okay, because you can only do so many API requests per minute. And if you do more, you get a 429 error. And then you have to wait a bit until you can make the next request. And we also have secure communication channels. So this is why the only thing that I really added was the CSP headers inside of the manifest.json file, as you can see here. Now, if any of you guys see another security-related issue, please let me know in the comments down below. As I've said, I will make this publicly available. So if you want to use this Chrome extension, you can just download it and load it into your browser. You can even make some changes to the code and maybe even contribute if you want to. And all you have to do really is to create an account with Anthropic and choose the API key, and then you can basically use it. I've even went ahead and changed the Worker.js file, because if you remember in the video, I'm using the API key value, or the API key. If we have a look here. So before that, I was using the key, which is called API key, okay? But we don't want to, so imagine the following. If I would have uploaded this to the Chrome Web Store and I would have made it publicly available, everyone would write to the exact same key, okay? And this is obviously not what you want, because you want each user to have its own key value pair, so to speak, to store their API keys. So this is why I used Cursor's solution of creating a UUID for each user and connect the basically the API key to that user, and also the writing excerpt to that specific user. Okay, and that's basically it. So as I've said, thank you for watching this video. If you have any suggestions for content that you want to see, please let me know in the comments down below. Other than that, see you in the next video.